What's happening, Bengals fans? Yes, it is the return of Inside the Jungle, the number one. Well, at least at one point was the number one fan podcast covering the Cincinnati Bengals. We've got some work to do to get back to that level. So excited to be back hosting Inside the Jungle and bringing back the OGs, Mickey, Scott, and Anthony. Guys, I can't believe we're actually doing this. Is this for real? Like, this is actually happening?
We're here. It's a reunion show.
I expected Thin Lizzy's "The Boys Are Back in Town" to be rocking as we took the air, but hey, I'll take that intro, Nick. That was solid.
Yeah, I mean,
Nick, I like the new Burrow jersey.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, that's
good.
I'm sure we'll be talking about one Joe Burrow tonight on this return edition of Inside the Jungle. Lots to get to. Obviously, you're probably wondering, why are we launching a podcast after 2 weeks of the NFL season? Well, frankly, it was because Anthony said it would be better if we launched it rather than the 9th week of the NFL season. So that's better late than never. So we're back. We're going to be doing the show. I think we're going to be doing it weekly. We haven't really discussed how often we want to do it, but the good news is we're back, and we're going to be talking Bengals here each and every week for those of you listening. So thank you for tuning in if you're watching us live or if you're listening to the podcast after the fact. Let's welcome in. I will introduce these gentlemen individually one by one because they certainly deserve it. I'm going to welcome in the oldest co-host of Cincinnati Soccer. Cincinnati. I knew I was going to do that once tonight. Inside the Jungle. He was with me the longest. Mickey Mentzer. Mickey, how you been, buddy?
I've been good, man. Just getting older, getting more gray hair watching these Bengals play, but it's been awesome, man. It's good to be back on here talking.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on what's transpired with the Bengals, because a lot has changed since you and I, since all of us really, we're doing Inside the Jungle. So looking forward to hearing your thoughts. We also welcome back the man from the left coast, AKA the background king. I forgot all about that, Anthony. Anthony Cosenza joining us here. AC, what's going on, buddy?
Well, did you see the lid?
I did.
We're going in the Wayback Machine, my friend. Good to see you guys, and thanks for having me back on. And I've been looking forward to this. It's been a long time coming for us to get back together, and yeah, a lot to talk about. I know there's been a lot of changes with the team, but the more they change, the more they sometimes stay the same, right?
Right. That is a good point, AC. Obviously, you've been keeping busy with the stuff over at Cincy Jungle, doing your own podcast thing as well. What have you been up to?
Writing, little podcasting, doing some social media stuff, and obviously got a day job and a family, and just dealing with what 2020 has brought all of us, right? It's been an interesting year to say the least, but keeping busy and keeping an eye on the Bengals. I will say that even though they're 0-2 this offseason, being what it was, they what they did this offseason in free agency and the draft really kind of reinvigorated interest, not only for myself, but I think most of the fans.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% there. One thing that is still constant with AC is it's always suns out, guns out with Anthony over there. So our fans will certainly remember that.
Polishing over the years, but yeah, something like that.
Let's also welcome back to the show the one and only Scotty B, Scott Bantel. Scott, how you been, man?
Good. Like Mickey, a little older. I got a couple grays in the beard as
Where?
well.
I don't see them.
I may have removed a few of them, but they are there.
Yeah, trust me, I know that feeling all too well. What have you been up to?
Just family.
Yeah.
The kids are 100% schooling from home right now. So I am working and teaching. I'm teaching kindergarten and second grade a couple of days a week.
Wow.
Which is interesting and fantastic. So that's been really interesting. So,
was that a full-time career change?
Oh no! This is this is the kids are.
Oh, I see. You're just doing it from home. Okay, gotcha.
This was forced on me by the school system. This was no career change.
Gotcha. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I've been fortunate enough that my kids are 12 now, so they don't need the adult supervision as far as the schoolwork. In fact, if they asked me to help, I don't know how much help I really would be. So I'm sure you're dealing with that too, Mickey.
Yeah, mine are a little older, a little more self-sufficient.
Yeah.
But yeah, the what's killing me, Nick, is we talked a little bit before the traveling for sports. Our kids are sports stars in the making, and what everything that comes with that is insane. Like, it's just nuts how early that stuff starts.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable just how busy we've been traveling the state, traveling the region for soccer and softball, and yeah, it is pretty crazy. So the main question we want to know is, or we want to discuss, is why bring it back, right? Why bring back Inside the Jungle and when there's so many more Bengals podcasts now going out than there were back when we started this bad boy? The reason is I just want to talk Bengals again, right? It's a good time to be a Bengals fan. There's a lot to be excited about, even though they are 0-2, as Anthony said. It's a different feeling. It's a different kind of organization at the moment. I went back over the last couple of weeks and started to dig in and do my research and see what's going on. And like, just the social media presence alone, like, I don't recognize these Bengals, right? They've changed from that front. The website's like kind of modern, right? And for me, it was just like, I don't recognize this Bengals team. So it's pretty exciting. So that's why I wanted to bring it back. Why did you want to bring it back, Mickey?
I got stuff to say. It's the same reason I started Who Dey Fans way back in the beginning. Like, I get frustrated listening to other people's opinions on radio or whatever. I've been super close to jumping in, to try to talk on AC's podcast because, man, people may have hated me before, but they may hate me more now. Like, I have some strong opinions that aren't mainstream right now.
All right. And that's the good reason for us to start the show back. And there are a lot of things to say. What was the biggest reason for you, Anthony, that you wanted to bring it back?
I just want to see you goons again. Missed you guys. I work with some great people and doing different things for covering the Bengals. But, we had a really good thing going for quite a while with all four of us. And when you expressed interest again, I know you're doing really well with your Cincy Soccer Talk, Nick. And when you expressed interest to revive this program, I was all in. So, it's really just talking more Bengals and talking with you guys. That's what it was about for me, for sure.
And I'll be honest, like, Scott has been the number one antagonizer on social media with me. Like, anytime I'd post about the Bengals, Scott would be like, "Oh, here we go. It's going to start back up. It's only a matter of time."
I can see you getting the itch, Nick. I remember when we signed off last time, I think you were pretty much done with the Bengals. You were getting rid of your stuff. You were claiming you weren't going to watch any more games. You probably sold that Tate signed picture.
No, I still have it.
But to see that you've invested in a brand new Burrow jersey, I'm wondering I'm wondering what's going on.
Well, there's a lot to be excited about, right? So that'll be our next subject here. Let's talk about that, right? The Cincinnati Bengals, since we last did a show, they were quarterbacked by Andy Dalton. He's now moved on and got a snap this weekend for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Cincinnati Bengals drafted number 1 overall pick Joe Burrow, arguably the greatest college season in the history of the sport at quarterback, and fell right into the Bengals' lap there at number 1. It's a different time now, and a lot of people are very excited. I still see a lot of people saying that Andy Dalton was still a good enough quarterback to lead this team, but I don't know. For me, after 2 games, I'm thinking, wow, this is a completely different. So, Mickey, I know you've got some strong thoughts on where this team is as far as the quarterback is. So, what do you think? Joe Burrow, is he your guy now?
I hope so. I hope Joe Burrow is the greatest Bengals quarterback we've ever seen. But I'm going to flip it right back on you real fast, Nick. So, the Bengals are 0-2.
Yeah.
And you say, you see something different with Joe Burrow. What is it you're seeing?
I think the biggest thing I'm seeing is when he's dropping back to pass, I don't get a sense that he's panicking, right? I get a sense of almost calmness. Whereas when I watched Andy Dalton drop back, it just seemed chaotic, right? It just seemed like he wasn't sure of himself, right? Or of the protection in front of him. Whereas Joe kind of stays in there and, he takes the hit. And when he does take the hit, usually he's making a throw that's on point, right? So for me, it just, from a visual standpoint, it looks completely different at quarterback than it did under Andy Dalton. Do you agree with that statement, AC?
I do. My take on the transition from Dalton to Burrow and Lewis to Zach Taylor last year. I really liked what Andy Dalton did for this team. I really liked what Marvin Lewis did for this team for years and years and years. The unfortunate truth was neither of those guys are winning the important games for this team, whether it's primetime or playoffs or what have you. And it wasn't all on both of them. The team failed around them. We know the stories. We know everything that happened. But it's kind of one of those things where you've had a lot of chances and you're just not winning those games. We got it. And it was a big move for the franchise to go after a young, unproven coach in Zach Taylor. And, it's not really a big move earning the right to draft Joe Burrow number 1 overall. But, the last 2 off seasons, it's kind of like, well, we're going to make some big organizational shifts here and see where that goes. I agree with you in the, it seems as if Burrow is bringing a little bit of that collectiveness, that headiness to the quarterback position that he showed at the end of his college year last year. Truth be told, early in the year, I was more on board with Justin Herbert. I really liked the tools that he showed, but then, Burrow had the epic ending to the year that really, I think swayed everybody's opinion. But, I think he is the guy. I think, unfortunately, we know the offensive line's kind of a mess. Yeah. We know Zach Taylor is still finding his way as an NFL head coach. He never was an NFL coordinator, really. And then, of course, you've got the pandemic offseason, no preseason games to even get his feet under him, Joe Burrow, that is. So, there's a lot kind of going against him as the Bengals started the season. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing in this 0-2 start.
Yeah. How about you, Scott? Does it look different to you?
To me, it does. I think when you look at the Bengals under Dalton and Lewis, I think the word that I would describe is just stale. I feel like they had gotten stale. And, I'd always been a Dalton supporter. I still like Dalton. I think that he took a lot of blame that maybe, wasn't necessarily fair. But the thing that I noticed different with Burrow, Nick, I think you mentioned it, was when the pocket collapses around him, his eyes are looking for a play. When the pocket collapsed around Dalton, it was, like you mentioned, panic. That's when you start to see the mistakes. The other place that I see a big difference is just the ball placement. When we talk about Dalton, it wasn't that he necessarily didn't complete the passes, but when Dalton would complete the passes, oftentimes they were in locations that stopped the receiver. And so a 7-yard pass was a 7-yard gain. With Burrow, you're seeing it where he's hitting guys in stride and a 7-yard pass becomes a 12-yard gain, and that makes a big difference throughout the rest of the game. So those are just some of the initial differences that I see right now between a very young rookie who certainly doesn't look that way. Yeah. And what we had seen the past, 9+ years with Dalton.
Mickey, I know you got some more thoughts before I throw it to you. We've got some folks watching us live. Cody in the chat room, our own Cody, our good buddy Cody Toomey says Scott ruined Dalton. So yeah, he also agrees not letting guys getting smoked on hits with better placement too. So, yeah, Mickey, your thoughts?
It's tough to make those calls 2 games in, right? I could also a lot of times you see what you want to see. I could also talk about 2 overthrows on deep balls in the end zone. I could talk about a ridiculous shovel pass that you should never make at any level. But I'm not here to bash Burrow. Like, everything about this kid I like. Here's my analogy, and I'm only throwing it out now because my brother-in-law blew me up on Twitter because I used this analogy after a couple bourbons the other day. You have a wooden boat, Nick, and you have an okay engine, right? But you have a bunch of holes in the bottom of your boat. The solution is not to go get a better engine, right? When we talk about what Dalton did last year, it's everyone blames Dalton. It was, Dalton's terrible. And now, arguably under a little bit improved offensive line, it's, the line's terrible. The line's going to get Burrow killed. Like, I'm just so frustrated with the Bengals in general. Marvin, and Dalton, the knock was they couldn't win the primetime games. Look what just happened in our last primetime game against the Browns. Like, we got gashed on a defense that we're supposedly rebuilding. And sure, we didn't, we're missing a couple pieces, but I mean, there was just no heart there. I love the moxie from Burrow, but I mean, there was too many other things that I think could have helped this team in the long run. And who knows what the conversations were, but the rumor was that Miami was going to offer their 3 first-round picks and potentially their second to get a shot at Burrow. I took some notes. Some of the players you could have had if you'd make that trade is you could have had AC's guy Herbert, who looked incredible on Sunday against the Chiefs. At pick 18, you could have had offensive tackle Austin Jackson. You could have had Damon Arnett from Ohio State. A corner looked great last night. Linebacker Clavon Chasen from LSU. And at 30, you could have had another tackle from Georgia, Wilson. Like, all those things could have happened, and those are 3 impactful players you could have had instead of this brand new quarterback. And so my issue is not necessarily with Burrow, but I'm just nervous that the Bengals are taking a page out of the Browns playbook where they just keep replacing the quarterback and don't bother to fix the rest of the team. And I don't think any one of us would expect Mahomes to be Mahomes if he was drafted by the Bengals. You know what I mean? Like, he fell into a situation which makes him look like a world beater. Kind of like what happened to Burrow at LSU, right? Like, the amount of talent on that team. Right. Sure, he played incredible, but he was surrounded by just the greatest college football team we've seen in a long time. So I don't know. Like, the jury's still out, and if in 2 years we're like, oh crap, Zach Taylor sucks, Burrow sucks, like we did ourselves a real disservice by not adding more weapons. And sure, I get the arguments. Would Mike Brown sign him, or would we mess up those draft picks? Probably, right? We're the Bengals, but the potential for rebuild was there. And all we did was get a better engine. Does that make any sense?
It's an interesting take. Yeah, I mean, but I think what the team needed was, man, it's just, and not just the team. I think the fan base needed a spark. They needed something, right? And if you don't take Burrow with that pick, and yes, you could have accumulated a lot of picks and made you better, I don't necessarily know that would have re-energized the franchise and re-energized the fan base.
You know what else re-energized the fan base? Winning. I get that. And look at Tom Brady. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be that guy that falls number 1. I mean, if there was a recipe to make it perfect, like, every team would do it. So I totally get it. But man, when the Bengals have been good, when the Bengals had a legit shot, our lines were incredible.
Yeah, it's hard to argue.
I understand Mickey's argument, and I like the analogy about the boat and the fact that, you're replacing an engine in a boat that has a lot of holes. But what you've done is you've placed an engine on a boat that has a lot of holes that can potentially haul ass to Paradise Island a lot quicker than the last engine you had on the boat. And it can conceal some of the holes in the boat a lot better than the previous engine. And I think that's kind of the counter argument you would make there. I think obviously there's a lot of work to be done by Burrow, and Burrow himself has said, hey, I think his first game he gave himself a D, which is not far off of what I would have given him that game. The shovel pass was like Gus Frerotte type of stuff. The missed throws to AJ, the missed throws to John Ross. There was one to Uzama in that game. So I mean, there's a lot of issues that need to be cleaned up, but. It's a move that needed to be made in terms of getting that quarterback. You kind of would have a fan base mutiny as a whole if you didn't take the hometown kid, the former Ohio State kid, the national champion. The list goes on and on. And I do understand, though, to Mickey's point, the issue of the multiple holes in the boat And especially on the offensive line, we know that this team probably wasn't going to be fixed in one offseason, but the fact that your only offensive line acquisitions this year is Xavier Suafilo, a journeyman interior offensive lineman, and Hakeem Adeniji, a 6th-round pick guard tackle who's a backup, and you bring in this valuable asset, I don't get the mindset there. And
don't forget Jonah Williams.
Well, yeah, I mean that's an asset you get back. But I mean, my point is the Bengals and their staff told us that they were far more confident in the state of their offensive line than the rest of us were. And so far the fan base is proving to be correct, not so much the coaching staff. And, Burrow's had his mistakes as a rookie quarterback. I think those were to be expected even from him being this great college quarterback. But, the offensive line play needs to improve, and the defense needs to improve. You invest all of this money and draft picks. I think they brought in 5 linebackers this offseason. They traded one away, but 3 interior defensive linemen. I think, Khalid Kareem and Mike Daniels and, I mean, at some point you gotta look back at some of these coaches, their schemes, and what they're drawing up as well when the team is actually spending money, and kind of have a look in the mirror, right?
Well, I guess from a quarterback standpoint, let's talk about the first 2 games so far, Scott, because I wasn't sure what to make of what Joe Burrow was going to be with no offseason OTAs. Just a training camp to really get to know his receivers. AJ Green didn't participate in much of training camp, and it clearly is showing in these first 2 weeks. Are you surprised at? And I know he graded himself a D, but I don't know. I guess I thought he has performed better than I was expecting from a rookie quarterback with little to no experience with OTAs and his receivers.
Yeah, I would say that I definitely think he's performed better than I expected. I would say I'm not surprised the way he graded himself. I'm sure his expectations were a lot higher of himself than ours were. That being said, when I look at these first 2 games, shuffle pass aside, I'm not sure. I had flashbacks of Gus Frerotte as well, Anthony. But shuffle pass aside, there's not a single thing about this guy's game that I've looked at that I think of, wow, he kind of looks like a rookie. Each game he has taken the team when they've needed it straight down the field and been on point. I mean, you've never seen an ounce of panic in this guy. And, he's been anything but rookie. Like, he has looked like a 5, 6, 7-year veteran out there. You can see it in the way the team, kind of rallies around him. You can see the confidence they have in him. You can see the confidence he has in himself, which I think is one of the things that Dalton was lacking. I like Dalton. I thought he did a good job and overperformed, for his expectations. But, the fact of the matter is what they've lacked in their last 2 quarterbacks, in both Dalton and Palmer. Palmer had all the skills that you look for in a quarterback, but he lacked the leadership, right? He was a guy you just never, I don't want to say soft, but he was a guy that needed everything around him to be perfect. Dalton, a little bit the same. He had a little more of the leadership, but he just didn't have the physical tools to do everything that maybe his body wanted him to do. He's a guy that you can win with, a guy you can definitely win 9, 10, 11 games with. He's not the guy that can elevate the guys around him. I think Joe Burrow is that guy. Joe Burrow is that guy that we've been looking for. And, for the most part, making your argument of, take all the picks, I would be 100% on board, with the exception of 2 quarterbacks that I've seen in the last couple of years. Maybe not couple years, last 10-ish years, would be Andrew Luck and Joe Burrow coming out of college. I'll admit Mahomes, I didn't know much about him. So I can't say I thought he was some great prospect coming out. But these 2 guys are guys I look at and say, these are guys you can build around. If it were any other quarterback year, I'd be all on board. I'd say trade the picks away, get as much as you can, and start there. But, if you can get a franchise changing quarterback, which I'll go on record here and say that I do think that is Joe Burrow. You take that. Every opportunity you can get. You can plug those holes eventually. look, Kansas City doesn't have a great offensive line either. Let's not pretend like they've got this great offensive line. A quarterback can hide a lot of those things. So,
yeah, you're right. It can. And one thing that Kansas City has is some pretty talented receivers. One thing that Cincinnati has at wide receiver and a franchise tag designated player is AJ Green, and he is definitely not living up to that franchise tag. So, Mickey, I'm going to ask you the question: what's happening here with AJ? Is he? Are we ever going to see the AJ Green that we had hoped we would?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is a guy who also hasn't played in forever, right? He was hurt. He is older, but he's still a heck of a player. I don't think he's washed up. I'm not as concerned about AJ as I am the rest of the team.
What about you, AC?
Totally agree. I think AJ will be fine. I know that may not be a popular opinion. Last week, what do you have? 12 or 13 targets, only 3 catches for less than 30 yards. That's not good. But look, you're talking about a guy that has barely played in 3 of the last 4 seasons because of injuries. You're talking about a guy who did not get his legs under him in terms of conditioning because he was hurt in training camp. And you're talking about a guy who, yes, he's up there in age. And guess what? He played 2 games in like 4 days, right? 5 days. So, and one of them is on the road. So, he's going to be a little fatigued on Thursday night, and I think that showed. He also went up against Denzel Ward, a very good cornerback. Denzel Ward played his butt off in that game, and really blanketed AJ Green, one of which actually would have been a touchdown catch. Arm barred, wasn't called. Missed touchdown, easy touchdown in week 1 that would have been the difference in the game. Bad throw by Burrow. So the plays are sometimes there. I think also the rapport isn't necessarily built totally yet between AJ Green and Joe Burrow. Burrow wants to feed him the ball, but I think also with the kind of the controlled passing, the drives sustaining type of passes, that's where guys like Tyler Boyd, Mike Thomas, and some of those guys maybe emerge a bit more, at least right now, because they've had more reps in practice with Burrow in training camp. He's a little more comfortable with him. But I think down the road, we're going to see the AJ Green we're accustomed to this year.
Wow, 2 positive answers so far. How about you, Scott?
I hope we'll see that AJ Green again. I'm not convinced. I take a look at it. AC, you mentioned it. All of the games he's missed. This is a guy that the last couple of years, when he's healthy, he's shown he's been still a great receiver. But that's a big win, right? I mean, he's missed almost 2 full seasons. I've got to see it from him again. I think our guy Fatal is probably going to remember this, but last time we did the podcast, I was on record saying, it might be time to trade AJ. I'm still on that boat. Man,
a lot of boat analogies tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if it's age, rust, injury. He seemed like he's come up limp a little bit a few times. Disgruntled about his contract, maybe a little bit of all of the above. We'll see. I hope it's just rust. But I'll believe it when I see it, and I'll believe it when I see him stay healthy.
Are you surprised, gentlemen, that AJ is actually still a Bengal, right? I mean, he could have easily been traded the last couple of seasons. I know he's been injured, but are you surprised? I mean, I guess, are you surprised that he hasn't pulled a Carson or tried to request to get out of town, considering everything that happened with this franchise in his career?
I'm not. He's not that kind of guy, I don't think.
Yeah. But are you surprised that they didn't move him when they could have?
No, because I don't think the Bengals are good at finding value in what they have, right? Like, the Bengals are so afraid that they'll take the bad end of a deal that they just don't deal.
The franchise tag was the best move this team could have made in terms of what's going to happen with AJ Green. I know it's a big chunk of money to eat this year, but at least they will know that, hey, we've got a guy that's returning back to form. We've got a guy that maybe can be a franchise wide receiver for another year or two. We can extend him, or maybe even do another franchise tag deal if you want to. Or if this team goes down the tubes, AJ Green kind of has a hit and miss here, you can trade him to a contender. The franchise tag was the best move, even though I think all of us sentimentally would like to see AJ end his career as a Bengal, but I think the franchise tag was the move to make for the Bengals in terms of keeping him for this year, seeing what he can do for a rookie quarterback. And no, I'm not surprised that he hasn't tried to get out. That's just it's not who he is. And he's openly talked about how much he likes being in Cincinnati, likes being a Bengal. So not really a surprise there.
Yeah, I'm not surprised he hasn't tried to force his way out. I'm not surprised the Bengals didn't try to trade him, just because that's not the way the Bengals operate. They don't trade their assets even when they're at their highest. But yeah, I think AC's right. I think the franchise tag was the best route to go with him. I know he didn't like it. He was even quoted in the offseason saying he has nothing to prove, but he's 100% wrong on that. He has a lot to prove. He has to prove that he can stay healthy. He has to prove he's still a top receiver. And if so, I think he'll get money here or elsewhere next year. But he does have something to prove at this point.
All right. Yes or no? Just a one-word answer, gentlemen. Is this the last year we see AJ Green in Bengal stripes? Mickey?
No.
Yes.
Anthony? Scott?
Yes.
I'm also going to agree. I think this is the last year. Now, we'll see what happens. If he has a poor year, right, to AJ Green standards, poor year, then maybe, he's not going to get the money that he was hoping he would get in a free agent year. But I also think it's time to move on. He's getting up there in age, and we shall see. We want to know what you think, though. Believe it or not, we've been around for one episode, and we already have an email address. So let us know what you think. InsideTheJunglePod@gmail.com is where you can email us. And, of course, we have a new Twitter handle as well, @InsideJunglePod. Make sure you give us a follow there so that you can stay up to date on all the latest here on Inside the Jungle. All right, heading into quarter number 3, let's talk about the offensive line, shall we?
Do we have to?
Oof, man. Yeah, it's amazing. I saw something today. I can't remember who tweeted this out. The fact that the Bengals, they let Whitworth go, and they've absolutely botched the replacement. They spent more money in trying to replace him at that position than it would have been to just keep him there. What's going on with this line, Mickey? I mean, back when we were watching this team be a perennial playoff contender, that was their strength, and now it's far from it.
Do you? I'm sure you've seen on Twitter the dancing job that Bobby Hart did on the fumble for Burrow, right? Do you remember who the guard was in that particular play?
That was Fred Johnson.
Sure. And so I find it very interesting that when you look at the Bengals depth chart, and I have it up here just for reference, right? Fred Johnson's our starting right guard. He's also listed as our backup right tackle and our backup left tackle. And so what this shows me is the Bengals are good with the product they're putting out there, and they're good with Fred Johnson. And Bobby Hart, it's insane that we've kept him around. But I think Johnson's just as much to blame. Now, if you had some serious bookend, right tackle like the Bengals have had in the past, maybe that makes someone like Fred Johnson, ups his game a little. But the fact that they're both so poor, it's baffling to me. And we're still running that out. Like there's no bet. I mean, Billy Price at right guard probably gives you more at this point than what we're getting. So yeah, it's so bad, and I don't see how they're going to improve it.
It's funny that you say that too. I go back to and Cody, who's watching us live in the chat, he mentions that so happy the gang's back together. Still remember the live draft, then casino night back when we did our live draft show from Lachey's. You remember what they did that night, Anthony? You remember what they drafted that night?
That's where I was going, but I wasn't there for the fun. I was there virtually. Before Zoom and all this stuff was the rage. I was joining you guys virtually. I couldn't make it out there, unfortunately.
But they whiffed on 2 tackle draft selections that night.
They did, and guess what? Paul Alexander pounding the table for Cedric Ogbuehi and Jake Fisher cost him his job, and he failed to develop those guys. Even if they just developed one of them into a serviceable, above-average player at one of the tackle positions, we'd be having a completely different discussion. But the fact that they thought they could play Fisher in a number of different places They thought they could get something out of Obuehi, and they were so confident in that they let both Andrew Whitworth and Kevin Zeitler walk. Unbelievable. By the way, do you know who one of, if not the top rank Pro Football Focus tackle is in the NFL right now?
Lay it on me.
Andrew Whitworth.
Yes, I did see that.
He's like my age. And he is, I know after week 1, he was the top tackle. I think he still is one of the top after week 2, if not the top. So, you make a decision like that. I understand from a team perspective, you think you've got future bookends. You want to try and save some money, but Whitworth was a great team player and a great player in general. Can't believe they let him go. And then now what you have, to Mickey's point, you got a lot of undrafted guys. You got a lot of mid-round guys. You got a lot of late-round guys coming in and starting at multiple spots on your offensive line, and that's the product you're getting. When you put out 4th rounders, 7th rounders, undrafted guys, that's largely the product you're going to get on the offensive line. I will say this, though. Trey Hopkins has really impressed me as a center. He has stepped up and played pretty stout football. And Jonah Williams has taken some lumps these first couple of weeks, but he has shown some things that really look good on tape. I don't think he'll ever be a Pro Bowl or, perennial Pro Bowl type of guy, but I think he will be an above average, at least, tackle for the Bengals going forward. He just needs to get some games under his belt, but they've got things to figure out at the other 3 positions for sure.
It's so funny because when we wrapped this show, however many years ago it was, tackle and guard was set, right? And we were worried about center. Now that's not the case. It's the other way around. Like we finally found the answer at center, Scott, and now the rest of the line is just poo.
Yeah, I remember going back to that draft at the time. I actually was a big fan of that draft because that was back in the time where I'm like, you know what, they may have just drafted their 2 bookend tackles when they didn't necessarily need it. 5 years down the road, we may be looking at this and thinking it's brilliant. Well, unfortunately, neither one of those guys panned out. I will defend the franchise in this regard, kind of like AC said, in that from a team perspective, I 100% understand why they let those guys leave. You think you've got your tackles. Now, where I've got the problem is clearly they were wrong. From a talent evaluation standpoint, clearly they got that wrong, and that has come back to bite them fiercely. But it's the same argument we just made with AJ Green is, at some point, the Patriots do it all the time. You let these guys walk and you bring the young guys in. They tried to do that and they failed miserably. The other spot is, we tend to forget they got burned on the offensive line last year a little bit by Clint Bowling. Clint Bowling was a above average guard who could also swing in at center. And he retired late, very late. And that kind of left them a hole they didn't have a chance to fill last year. And they're still trying to fill this year. This offense line would probably still suck with Clint Bowling. But if you look at an offensive line that's got Bowling at guard and Michael Jordan as the other guard, it's significantly better than it looks right now, right? So I look at this roster. I don't see how they fix this line with what's on the roster, and unfortunately, there's not a right tackle sitting out there to fix it. This is one of those situations where they've kind of got to duct tape and glue it together for the rest of this year. Hope they keep Burrow alive and address it as priority 1A in the offseason. I think you need at least a veteran and you probably need another high draft pick. But they've got themselves in a bad situation. Some of it their undoing, some of it bad luck. But the goal this year is to get through the season with Burrow still alive, and then you've got to fix that right side of the line.
What about, because I know they drafted the lineman out of Kansas, Akeem Adeniji. At what point do you throw him out there to see what he's got, right? I mean, could it be any worse than throwing Bobby Hart at right tackle?
Could it be? Maybe. I mean,
it'd be hard.
Yeah. I think you got to at some point, right? Maybe if you had a preseason, I still think Fred Johnson might have won that job had they had a preseason. I think that lack of a preseason is really coming into play too with that offensive line, because they weren't bad. If you remember the last 8 games last year, that offensive line was respectable. They were still below average, but Joe Mixon led the league in rushing the last eight games of the season last year. And they weren't getting Dalton killed, right? I know that's a low bar, but they weren't getting him killed, right? So I don't know. It's
for Adeniji, if you listen to Dave Lapham, who knows a thing or two about offensive linemen, he really likes the kid. I think I've heard some rumblings from Lap though say that, he, like Jonah last year, he kind of still has the college kid body, right? Like he's got to transform his body a little bit more in terms of strength and build to the pro game. And I think there's a little bit of concern there, but I think they feel that they've got a good talent there. I don't know. I to be honest with you, I didn't know much about him going into the draft process, but a guy I do some things with, he was really high on him. Mostly, he had a lot of starts at Kansas, played both tackle spots, and there's a lot to like there. So, I don't think throwing him right away is a good thing, but maybe down the line when the season, whatever path the season takes, maybe that's when you look at it. To Scott's point, the Bengals made adjustments the last 2 years. They made adjustments on the offensive line to really up the running game and play better offense. And maybe that's what we see. I hope it's not going to be 8+ games into the season when they do that, but adjustments need to be made, play call wise, scheme wise, all of that. And I just want to make one little quick agreement point to Scott's note about Clint Bowling. That was something I didn't really think about. Zach Taylor has had two of the worst types of off seasons completely out of his control to start his head coaching career, between playing in a Super Bowl and then coming to the team late, losing Clint Bowling, losing AJ Green last year. And then this year, no Geno Atkins, pandemic, the whole thing. I kind of feel bad for the guy a little bit, but total side note.
So how many more games do you go with the Bobby Hart experiment, Mickey?
0. I mean, this should be done. He shouldn't even be on this team. So, I don't know how you run him back out there. I don't know how anyone in film watches that clip of that fumble and runs him back out. He didn't even touch anyone. As a tackle, how does that happen?
Right.
Yeah, he did that week 1 too with Joey Bosa, the Ole. But who do you put there, Mickey? Who would you put there? That's a problem they find themselves in, right?
The million dollar question.
There's someone at home that's better than that.
Go grab somebody from the UCA offensive line. Cody in the chat says Fred Johnson. What do you think about that, guys?
Maybe, and you move Billy Price into the guard position. I could see that.
They also picked up that Calhoun kid, a guard. Maybe you give him a shot somewhere. The other thing, though, that you start to question is when you start playing musical chairs with these guys up front. Where's the continuity? Where's the cohesion that gets built? You don't want to build cohesion with a lesser talented unit, obviously, but there is something to be said with guys being on the same page up front. And when you keep playing, shuffling guys in and out, it's a double-edged sword that they're dealing with right now. They just don't have the cupboard stocked with the right amount of talent.
It is, but I think you've seen enough from Hart last season. For sure. He shouldn't even be out there. Another guy that I don't care if he gets on the field again is Ross. I'm done hearing how fast he is. I'd love, another Tate to be in anytime it's supposed to be him. Like, Ross is just not a good football player. So, and
another missed first round pick.
Yeah, just a
top 10.
There's a huge questions there that I wonder why we keep running these people out there.
Yeah, you got to throw Billy Price in there too. I thought that was a solid pick. That's another one. You look at their last.
But he still could be, right? Just maybe not at center. Like maybe he could be a serviceable guard.
Nick, I know you haven't watched a lot of Bengals games the last couple of years, but God, man, when he was in there, he's bad. Yeah. I don't know if it's short arms or what, but I thought that was a solid pick. You got a 10-year center, or at worst a guard, but he was worse at guard than he was at center.
I thought he played pretty well in week 1.
I'm pretty sure on Mixon's fumble, maybe AC maybe remember this. I'm pretty sure the offensive lineman that was in Mixon's lap on that play was Billy Price.
It was actually, I think it was Hart. I think Hart missed a block. I got to go back and look. There's something that happened there though that kind of an offensive lineman fell into Mixon a little bit, and he's doing the spin move. And look, the Mixon deal, that's a crushing turnover. Guy hasn't fumbled since his rookie year. you can tell he's just trying to make stuff happen. He's got guys in the backfield right when he's getting the handoff. It's like, you know, what the heck is he supposed to do? To the point about Price, the Bengals got snaked there because the Lions, one pick before, grabbed the guy that I think they wanted in Frank Ragnow. I think that was their guy. I think they liked Billy Price, but I think, you know, if they were going to get a center, Ragnow was the guy they wanted, and he went one pick before, and then they kind of, quote unquote, settled for Price, and they let the Daniels kid, you know, I think the Patriots picked him up. So, and he's been doing pretty well, I think. But, yeah, the Price thing, that's killed him. The Cordy Glenn thing that same year, that blew up in their face. I mean, it's just like, you know, how are they going to remedy this thing? It looks like they got something out of Jonah, like I mentioned, but
yeah, I forgot about Glenn. They thought they had the line fixed last year, right? You pick Jonah Williams, you get Glenn, you got 2 tackles, and next thing you know, Cordy Glenn's got a headache for 20 weeks straight.
Well,
Scott, I just went back and watched the tape.
I was trying to find it, Mickey. Who was it?
I think it's the center, man.
Really?
He gets blown up, hits Mixon in the backfield, and then a linebacker comes in and just pops the ball.
So maybe we're not set at center. I'm kidding.
Everyone's entitled to their bad plays every now and then.
But the good news is, gentlemen, I don't know if you saw it, but I'm assuming you did see it today. They did bring back Alex Redmond. He's going to fix everything, right?
He brings the nastiness, Nick. He brings the nastiness.
The silence is deafening.
I can hear the false start already.
Oh, that's fantastic.
In an empty stadium, no less. He'll false start in an empty stadium.
The piped in crowd noise will get him jumping. Oh, man. Well, one thing we know is that if they continue to play like they are, Joe Burrow will not survive the 16-game regular season. So let's hope that they get it together and get it fixed. Hopefully this weekend against the Philadelphia Eagles, who, by the way, aren't exactly great defensively at the moment. So we shall see. One thing that does need to get better, also on top of the offensive line, man, the run defense was just absolutely atrocious last week against Cleveland. And you could say the same of the week one. They gave 155 yards to the Chargers. It's not like Tyrod Taylor was going to beat you through the air. So, you know, you could kind of sell out on the run, and even then they still gave up 155 yards. Free agency, they spent a big amount of money on the defensive side of the ball. They brought in DJ Reader, the highest paid defensive tackle, I think, in Bengals history. What's going on? And I know they haven't had Geno Atkins, Mick, but man, you can't just is one guy that much of a difference?
I don't think so. I don't know. I mean, the last drive by the Browns where they didn't even have to throw a pass I mean, that was so frustrating. That was a classic AFC North football, right? And it was so infuriating the Browns did that to us, but everyone knew there was just going to be a run, and we had nothing. We had zero answers, and I'm with you, Nick. Like, I don't even know who to point a finger at when it's that bad.
It was pretty bad, AC. I mean, I know they brought in linebackers as well. They drafted a lot of linebackers, and yet we're still getting gashed on the run.
I don't know what to make of what we've seen so far this year in 2 games, because last year I went to the Seattle game, and if you remember, I think a lot of us came out of that game saying, hey, this might not be as bad of a season as we think. They were doing some things on defense. They were making a lot of substitutions. They had the Seahawks confused a lot. You kind of saw a lot of the same thing against the Chargers. Now, granted, the Bengals, I think, gave up like 155 yards on the ground against LA, but you know, a lot of those yards came when DJ Reader was out with cramps. Obviously, Geno Atkins was out of the lineup, and you know, that's when when the Chargers made a lot of their yards on the ground. Defense gave up 16 points at home. You should win that game, right? I mean, it's a winnable game. They kept it within reach regardless of the rushing yards. Then they give up all these yards to the Browns. But again, you're going on the road, short week, no Geno Atkins, no Mike Daniels, no Trey Waynes, who, by the way, was signed not only for his coverage ability, but a guy who was one of the top tackling corners in the NFL. I don't know what to make of it. I'm very concerned, obviously, when you give up like 400 rushing yards the first 2 weeks, but is it just the preseason stuff, the week one mixed bag stuff, or is this a trend because there's a lot of new faces, Lou Anarumo's over his head? I honestly don't have a good answer for you. I really don't.
Probably a combination of all those factors, right, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been impressed with Lou Anarumo yet. I thought the run defense looked okay against the Chargers when Reader was in there. You're right; they got gashed as soon as he left. I guess I hold out a little bit of hope that when Atkins and Daniels are back, that right now you're missing the two of your top three defensive tackles in that rotation. I'm hopeful that makes a big difference. That being said, I mean, that's concerning, right? All they had to do against Cleveland was stop them. They knew the run was coming and they couldn't. It is like flashbacks of, the Bengals for the last 25 years, right? Just seeing teams run down their throat. So, I don't know. Not good, but I don't know what the answer is. Like the offensive line, right? I mean, I'm at a loss for words, Nick.
And that's unusual for you, Scott.
Yeah.
I got to say.
Yeah.
One thing I will say, and it's not just the interior of the defensive line that I'm concerned with, right? Like it's the edge rushers that I'm still waiting for quarterbacks to be pressured this year, Mick. I know Carlos Dunlap getting up there in age. Sam Hubbard also playing defensive end. I don't know if I ever saw him being an NFL caliber defensive end, and that's tough for me to say being a Moeller grad myself, but I don't know. I guess let's go. They're not getting pressure. They're not stopping the run, and everything kind of. If you can't do that up front, then you're setting everything else behind you back because they're just playing on their heels.
Let's go full circle. I'll make some more enemies. Was there anyone in the draft up high that would have given you some teeth on the edge?
I'm the wrong guy to ask here because I thought that Chase Young was overrated. I thought he was going to be the next Vernon Golston. Now, believe it or not, he's already got 2.5 sacks in his NFL career. Vernon Golston only managed 6 in his entire career. So he's halfway there. So I don't know. I personally thought he was overrated, especially seeing the last 4 games at Ohio State, no sacks, and didn't really make much of an impact. Now, he didn't need to make much of an impact, but
he was also getting triple blocked. But I'm saying that kind of tongue in cheek, right? Like, if you don't make the trade with Miami, then you have to take Burrow, right? Unless somehow you could have got Herbert and Young and something, then there's a legit thing. But yes, I agree. Like, we're not getting that bite off the edge, and I would have loved add a Chase Young to this existing roster, and I'm super excited. But yes, like there's a piece missing there, and I'm still for Hubbard. I think at times he shows like a flash of something. It's just there's no consistency.
The consensus opinion is that the pass rush, fortunately and unfortunately for the Bengals, kind of starts and ends with Geno Atkins. Whether Geno Atkins is getting in there himself, whether he's eating up blockers to free up others, that's kind of the reality. And the Bengals have been fortunate enough to not really, he's been kind of a warrior. He's missed. He tore his knee up one year. I think it was 2014. And then, he's missed the first couple of games this year. I'm hard pressed to think of him missing other time. Now, as he's gotten, as he's gotten older, there's been a little bit more, a little less consistency to the Geno Atkins we've all known for years and years and years. But, when he's not in the lineup, it's noticed. Carlos Dunlap, where has he been the first 2 weeks? I can't even remember a play he's made. And that's a guy you rely on. Sam Hubbard, you thought he was going to be poised for this double-digit sack breakout season. Not much from him. He had one nice play in the first week. That's about it. Carl Lawson, guy who gets a lot of pressures but can't seem to get to the quarterback and bring him to the ground, cause that sack fumble, those big tide-turning plays. Do we overvalue these guys? I don't know. Or is it just the fact that Geno Atkins is – in that Aaron Donald mold, he's so important, and it just raises the play of everyone around him. I don't know. I think it may be a little bit of both.
And probably scheme as well.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly, whatever was being dialed up last week by Anarumo, I'm still waiting for them to make a tackle against the Browns in crunch time when they needed it. Now, and you bring up a great point, AC, because Geno does garner so much attention on that offensive line that 2 or 3 guys are blocking him, which then frees up some of the guys on the edge, right? I think maybe they thought that DJ Reader could be a guy that could be that sort of threat in the middle, but it's just whatever. It's just not happening. So we don't know the severity of the Geno Atkins injury, other than look, he hasn't practiced in a month now, 3 weeks. That's disconcerting for a guy who also is not getting any younger, Scott.
No, they never do, Nick. But I look at that defensive line, and I had high hopes for them last year, and I thought they really disappointed. Carl Lawson would be, I think number one on that list. Where after his rookie year, I thought this is a guy that's going to have double-digit sacks, and he seemed to disappear a lot last year. I can't remember a single play he's made yet through 2 games. I like Hubbard, I like Lawson, I like Dunlap, but I honestly can't think of a single play any of the 3 have made this year. I can think of a couple of times where Dunlap was biting down hard and got beat on the outside on some misdirection. That's the only time I remember seeing any of our defensive ends, and that's a problem, especially when your number 1 and your number 3 defensive tackle are out.
What do we make of the linebackers, right? We know they're a relatively young group. A lot of them drafted this offseason. But once again, we're I think since the last time we did this podcast, we had a pretty good linebacker, although albeit crazy and mental, Vontaze Burfict. We don't have that enforcer anymore, Mick. I was going back, I was looking at your Twitter profile today, and I saw you've got the banner with you and Vontaze when you played flag football there at Paul Brown Stadium. Brought back memories. But they don't have that guy in the middle that's basically going to make a play when you need him to.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking again at the roster, and AC's comment kind of stuck with me. Do we overvalue our players? But when you look at, if Atkins was healthy, if you look at a front with Dunlap, Reader, Atkins, and Hubbard, and then a back, with Von Bell, Jesse Bates, William Jackson, Darius Phillips, that seems solid to me, right? And then in the middle, man, there's such question mark. And you can't have a great defense without some presence in the middle, right? Name one defense that succeeded without a linebacker, whether you're getting gashed by a tight end or they take your defensive line out of it with quick hits. Like, those are the types of things. And so there's a lot of question marks there. To be honest, I'm extremely frustrated with what our defense has done so far this year. I'm less concerned about the defense than I am about the pieces of the offense we already talked about, right? Because what I see here is, Atkins is insanely frustrating. It's the typical Bengals day to day. He could never play again. Like, we just don't know with the way the Bengals, doctors seem to work those things out. but if he comes back, I don't know. Like, I could see a light at the end of the tunnel with this defense. There's just a huge question mark at the linebacker position.
No,
I guess I want to reference the 5th Beatle, Cody Toomey. We've been talking about him.
The 5th Beatle, I love it. That's great.
He's talking about the wide 9 scheme, and that's an interesting point in terms of. I referenced the game that I went to, Seattle. They kind of, in that game, the Bengals were very good against the run for the most part. They kind of bottled everything up, but they were kind of getting run right in the middle of the defense, and they didn't have to move laterally very much. If you go to week 2, the very next week, the Bengals played the 49ers, and there was a lot of outside runs, a lot of sweeps, a lot, all that stuff, and they got hammered. If you noticed against Cleveland, that was some of the same thing that happened. There was a lot of outside runs that they ended up kind of getting some chunk yardage with. And I thought that when you bring in a Logan Wilson, an Akeem Davis-Gaither, a Josh Bynes that move better laterally than a Preston Brown and company. I thought that they would have been able to clean some of that up. Again, is it just inexperience in a short week on the road? Maybe that's the issue in terms of the linebacker core. I saw some good things in week one from that group. Josh Bynes and Jermaine Pratt, I thought, played well in week one for the most part. Jermaine Pratt missed numerous tackles in week two. So, again, it's one of those wild card things. What's playing into this? Is it just youth, inexperience? Is it scheme? A lot of guys are talking about going back to the basics and tackling and all that kind of stuff, which was a major issue the past 2 years. And, I mean, at some point, you got to be able to clean this stuff up.
I want to ask your opinion, Mickey, because you are our resident safety here on this defensive back here on this podcast. Don't think I didn't forget that you're a natural corner. But when you saw Jesse Bates flopping around on the field, missing tackles left and right against the Browns, and then to look at the stat sheet after the game and see that he was your leading tackler, how shocked were you?
It wasn't just him. Like, just poor tackling in general.
Is that because they didn't have a preseason? Like, can you chalk it up to that?
I don't know. I mean, every team didn't really have a preseason.
Sure.
And the Bengals kind of carry that mantra of being poor tacklers. I mean, it rears its head many times. But I don't think they're learning that at the pro level. Like, I don't know. That's baffling to me. Is that I don't know what causes that. We've definitely pulled in players that have a tendency to not be able to tackle. And I don't know if it's like the shanks in golf where, it comes and goes, but yeah, that was insanely frustrating. Like, just wrap up.
Yeah. Well, man, believe it or not, gents, we've talked for an hour already. I mean, this first episode of the return of Inside the Jungle has absolutely flown by. It wouldn't be an episode of Inside the Jungle without a little predictions. So, Scotty B, beat me up, Scotty. I'm going to throw it to you first. What's going to happen this weekend between the Bengals and the Eagles at the Link?
It's a very good question. You got two teams 0-2. I think that 0-2 is a little more disappointing if you're a Philadelphia fan. So this is a big game for them. They've also they lead the league in sacks allowed. So maybe this is the week that our defensive line gets off the schneid. I don't see this Bengals team dropping to 0-3. Maybe it's me being a little bit of a homer, but I think they get the W. We'll go 27-23 Bengals.
All right. So Scott's going for a win. How about you, AC? By the way, if you're watching us live on the chat, would love to get your predictions in here as well. AC, look, Philadelphia has been pretty bad defensively as well since over the last 6 quarters. Is this a chance for Burrow and the Bengals to get their first win?
And I think Carson Wentz has made. I haven't watched the Eagles closely the past couple of games, but I think Carson Wentz has made a couple of critical mistakes too, if I'm not mistaken, which is, depending on who you ask, either uncharacteristic or characteristic of him. I tend to agree with Scott. I didn't feel good about the Browns game, and I tend to agree with Scott, I think, on this one. And I think there's going to be a lot of points scored because of the defensive issues that we've talked about. And, I think they're going to want Burrow to throw the ball probably 40 times or so. And he can put up some points. And I think Wentz can put up points too. So I'll say 34-31 Bengals.
I'll ask you for another prediction as well, gents. But first, Mickey, your score prediction for this weekend?
I'm going to go the Bengals cover, but lose 27-30.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, the Philly defense is pretty bad. All right. So I guess the next prediction I've got for you, gents, is
what about yours?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I should probably throw mine in there. I think the Bengals get the win this weekend. I think Philly is just, defensively not very good. They let the Redskins, who I don't think are that great offensively either, they let the Redskins walk all over them. Granted, that was due to Carson Wentz throwing 55 interceptions in that second half. But I think the Bengals get the win. I think they'll score. I think they're going to go 35. I'll go 38-24 Bengals. They win by 2 touchdowns against the Eagles. We've got a couple predictions in here. Cody's saying Philly, bad defense, bad offensive line, a quarterback like seeing ghosts because of it. Bengals get Joe Burrow's first W. He says 35-30 as his score prediction. I'll ask you, gentlemen, how many times is Joe Burrow going to drop back to pass this weekend? Because he threw a ton against the Browns. And we didn't even get into the fact of when are we going to get Joe Mixon involved in running the ball. I know you got this new flashy toy in Joe Burrow, but man, Joe Mixon's got to start carrying the ball to help ease that pressure on Joe Burrow, Scott.
I gotta think the coaching staff doesn't want to see a 60 spot up there again. I was just taking a look at it. Looks like Philly gave up 191 yards rushing last week.
There you go.
So I'm hoping that the coaching staff looked at the ESPN.com stat sheet like I did and run the ball a bit more. I'll say 35. 35 is the number.
35 dropbacks for Burrow. What about you, AC?
I guess I'd set the over under at like 39 or 40. I don't think it's going to be like 50 or anything unless it somehow gets to overtime or something like that. And I definitely don't think they want to have him throw and potentially get hit as many times as he was last week. So I would say right around 40 is probably the number they'd like to see. They'd like to see him throw.
All right.
I'm going 45.
Just Price is writing this thing.
Anybody writing this down?
When you look at the type of passes he's throwing, right? Like they're not getting huge chunks of yards. Like they're doing those quick hits. And so, I mean, your drives are
kind of
longer.
have to because he's got no protection.
True. And I think that's also part of the plan they have for him for now. So, yeah, I'm going to go 45.
All right. We got this comment, and I had to bring this up because the kicker in me needs to talk about it. I know we're running late here, gents. But Jake says 30-27, Randy with a redemption game winner. Come on, man. He didn't have a cramp. No freaking way. I kicked footballs for 3 freaking years. Not one time did I get a cramp in my damn legs. Now, I know I wasn't kicking on an NFL professional level, but you ain't using your calves when you're kicking a ball. You're using your core. Mickey knows all about these muscles. Your core and your glutes and your quads. He wasn't hurt. And if you saw what he did this week or last week at the Browns, booting touchbacks left and right, making long field goals, the dude just choked. Am I right? Tell me I'm right, gents.
He Roethlisbergered it. You do something stupid and you fake an injury.
I think he went full soccer mode.
Yeah. Right?
He missed the sitter and you look down at the ground and yeah, I think he
made it worse by that. Attempt at massaging his calves.
I don't think one bit that he was hurt. AC?
I don't want to call the guy a liar about something like that, but I do find it a little hard to believe. And that shot of Burrow's face on the sideline was just like, I don't know. I was like emotionally crushed just seeing his face going like, because it's like, oh boy, did the Bengals get to him already in one game?
By the way, the minute he was limping off the field was the minute I decided we're bringing the show back. Scott, am I crazy?
And my favorite was that he's still not even sure which calf he hurt, right? The injury report, would normally say left calf, right calf. It was listed as calves, plural. Randy Bullock calves.
Oh, man. Well, the good news is he made his kicks against the Browns. But I just when I saw Jake's comment, I had totally already forgot about. I was getting that bad memory out, and I had to quickly bring that up. Gentlemen, this has been an absolute blast. Talking Bengals again. Like I said, this time absolutely flew by. You got any final thoughts as we get out of here, Mick?
No, I mean, I want to leave all the people frustrated with the thought that, like, I am definitely a Burrow guy. Like, he's an Athens kid, Ohio. Everything that guy does, I'm a fan of. I hope he's the greatest Bengals quarterback ever. I just think there's so many holes, and we had an opportunity to make some changes. Hopefully it all works out.
Good stuff, Mick, and it's been a pleasure. All right, AC, the background king. Over on the left coast, the best coast. Final thoughts?
Yeah, it's 7:30 here. I got another hour in me. I don't know where you guys are going, but no, it's been good chatting with you guys again. I know we kind of keep a little bit in touch via social media and whatnot, but I've been looking forward to this, like I said, and I'm glad it's continuing and good to chat some Bengals with you guys. Kind of feels normal in a year that has been anything but.
That's an excellent point. It does not feel normal at all, but bringing this back, you're right, AC. It does feel normal, and glad we were able to make it work out. All right, Scotty B, beam me up. Final thoughts?
It's great being back, gents. It's like hopping on a bike, right? It's like no time missed. I will say I have never been so excited about a Bengals team that's 0-2. On Sunday, I mean, I was giddy after the game. Or I'm sorry, on what day was
Thursday.
the game? On Friday, the day after the game. Normally I'd be frustrated, but I mean, I was excited. I see a franchise. I think Burrow wins this is Super Bowl.
Ooh.
I see it next. We'll go 7 years.
All
next
right.
7 years, we get at least one.
He's going for at least one. Pete Prisco also saying the same thing. So you're in the Pete camp.
I'm not sure if that's a good thing, but
well, I appreciate you being on the show, buddy.
you bet.
We'll do a little background. We'll pull back the curtain. We didn't start on time tonight. That's just because things never change. Sometimes we were gonna start at 9, and you just knew something was gonna happen. But Scott, you fought through it. You battled through it like you had Joe Burrow's offensive line in front of you, and you came out a winner. So good job, buddy.
Yeah, behind the curtains, just to let you know, you can kind of see it back here. That's my couch stacked up. My studio flooded today midday.
Wow.
So that is why I was so scrambling. I spent like 5 or 6 hours tearing up the studio down here, and yeah, that's my couch stacked up too high behind me.
Well, we appreciate all that you did tonight to make it happen, buddy.
You bet.
Go ahead, Nick.
Nick, thanks for getting us all together. Before you do your final thought, there's been a couple comments. Let everyone know where they can find us.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's exactly where I was going right now.
Perfect.
So yes, the show we'll stream it on Twitter tonight. We streamed it on our new Twitter handle at Inside Jungle Pod. I also streamed it on my Twitter handle just because we've got some followers there. Eventually, we'll move it over to it so that it's just strictly on the Twitter Inside Jungle Pod. We're also on YouTube, so do a search for Inside the Jungle on YouTube. Make sure you go and subscribe there. That way, you get a notification every time we go live. Participate in the chat. We've got folks on Twitter and on YouTube chiming in tonight. And eventually, probably within the next couple of days or so, you will be able to find Inside the Jungle on a podcast platform of your choosing, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn. We'll make sure, or I'll make sure to get the podcast in all those different podcast networks, so that way you can get subscribed to the show, so you don't miss a single episode of Inside the Jungle. Did I miss anything? Did I get all the business out there? Well, good. Again, thank you to Mickey, AC, and Scott for agreeing to do this again. It's been a lot of fun. I must say, I do need to give a big shout out and thanks to my lovely wife. She was able to score this little rack behind me that I could hang the curtains, and that way you're not seeing the board games and whatnot we've got back here behind me. So I must give her a big shout out and thanks for helping me out. Now I've got 2 different studios down here, one for the soccer and one for the football. That's the way it goes. But thank you to her. And thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks to everybody who tuned in to watch us live. For Mickey, AC, and Scott, I'm Subes. We'll see you next time on Inside the Jungle. Hooday!